You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On at Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available, sometimes more than just once a day, like for this reaction episode with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris joining us from Kansas City, where it went down as Texas Tech squeaks by the Cougars of BYU. Chris, 81-67, and I think we had high hopes about your chances of winning the ball game, certainly. I mean, that wasn't some outlandish thought, but I don't know if anybody was expecting to dial it up like they did with a really strong start. A BYU response eventually, but then a strong finish from Texas Tech to go with that to give themselves their second win of the year over the Cougars and a 14-point margin. Had to be a lot of fun for you calling that one.
Yeah, I mean, I was not expecting. I mean, not to win, but I just wasn't expecting the way you would be able to do it. I think the BYU folks seem to think this is a really bad matchup for them. I think we've spent all season long pointing out how many bad matchups there are for Texas Tech and the Big 12. It doesn't help BYU that Ali Khalifa unable to play in the second half and dealing with an ankle injury. It doesn't obviously help BYU's situation when they go 7 of, I think, 35 from 3 because, they are more than capable of really hurting you. But I think Texas Tech did a phenomenal job of making those contested looks. It just didn't give them many clean looks, and there was really not much, of the backdoor cuts, the slip screens, things like that BYU can make you look really, really silly on. And I just think Texas Tech's coaching staff did a phenomenal job of getting these kids ready to play because you were prepared for all the things that they may or may not do, and what they heavily rely on, but they just couldn't really get much traction. And I think we've said this before on this show, but you can win games at different times of the game, and I think you largely won this game in the first half. And you did have to hold on. You knew BYU was going to make a run, and I was afraid that it was start to get really crazy for you when they cut it to 7 points. Yeah. With about 4 to go, because I mean those BYU fans in the stands at the T-Mobile arena there in downtown Kansas City started to kind of feel a little momentum, and you started to feel some pressure with some just careless turnovers. But pressure makes you do that. But man, what a phenomenal day today, man! What a phenomenal game, and a huge win for you that should pay some dividends for you.
Yeah, got a little tied under the collar there for a moment. There was plenty of time left in the game, especially for a team that shoots it as well as BYU. So you're wondering, is some of the madness creeping in a little early? It is that time of year, but thankfully Texas Tech able to fend them off. A couple of keys to victory that we talked about on a previous episode were on point or close to it, Chris, with what we saw play out for Texas Tech today. You talked about keeping BYU under 80. You talked about less than 10 made three-pointers for BYU, and both of those things came true. Now, I did mention 32 points from Pop Isaacs, like in the first matchup, would also be a terrific key to victory. Didn't quite get to the 32, but didn't have to have the 32. Went for 22 instead. Terrific individual effort from him. And really the Red Raiders in a lot of ways needed this kind of thing specifically from Pop Isaacs today because what had been their most reliable impact player in Darion Williams obviously hobbled up and not at a 100% clip for the remainder of the day. So really, really key to see that impact from Pop Isaacs, and love to see him have success on this kind of platform.
Yeah, and I tell you what, Texas Tech is really starting to turn themselves into. I don't know if we've seen enough yet to say, man, they're really good at it. But the other key thing in the game was on the glass. I thought you got hammered on the glass the first time you played these guys. It was a -10. Today it's a +10. And I think that's a bit of a difference in the way this one turns out because And I'm sure we all guessed correctly that Chance McMillan will lead all players on the floor in rebounds for this
Of course.
one. I mean, that wild to me. I mean,
we've talked about it. The dude
Yeah.
battles on the boards. We've talked about it for months now.
But I mean, in a Big 12 tournament game, for him to have close to a double is wild, because he's every bit of 6'2", maybe. And that's, but it just speaks to how much fun this team is and what Grant's able to get out of them.
He's hungry.
But yeah, I mean,
hey, how about close to a double-double for another hungry guy? It looked like in Robert Jennings, 10.7 rebounds for him. I mean, you just got some really tournament-like efforts from a couple of guys, more than a couple.
He's playing really, really well. And there was some turnovers there where he gets sped up a bit. I know he'd love to have back, where you can tell, okay, he's still a sophomore, but I mean, he is battling and he is so much better. I really appreciate when coaches from the other team really call out certain things after a game. And Mark Pope, to his credit, he said they have unbelievably rebranded themselves and are playing so much different than when we first saw them. And I think he kind of pointed out somebody like Robert Jennings. And I tip my cap to, because, I mean, he's seen you from January 20th to now, and you're a different team right now. And this is exactly why we had kind of talked about the whole Warren Washington thing, and it's going to be tricky, welcoming him back. I'm not so certain that this is what your team is right now, Casey, and then this is how you're going to roll. I really, if Warren wasn't going to be ready, today or this weekend, I just don't know when it's going to happen for you. But to Robert Jennings' credit, he has embraced the challenge and stepped up. And, I think he's been a huge reason why you've been able to out-rebound Baylor and BYU, which is a legit statement to make. And these are two of your biggest wins of the year on paper and otherwise. And I think he's had a lot to do with them.
I mean, for EY as well, I know he was light in some other statistical categories today, but 5 boards from him. I thought that this was really one of your more complete team efforts. I don't know if there's been another game this year where you've had 5 double-digit scores, which is what you had today between McMillan, Jennings, Kerwin Walton, Joe Toussaint, and Pop Isaacs. It's bizarre that Darion Williams is not a part of that on the day that you have all that other scoring, but for already and obvious stated reasons. But I thought this was a really complete team effort from Texas Tech today, whether it's, in the rebounding department, obviously what you're doing on the defensive end of the floor. 23 points in the first half for BYU, Chris. That was a sight for sore eyes to see that type of defensive effort from Tech.
Yeah, 42-23 at the half. And, it's funny because Jerry Pollard, one of the officials of the game, he comes over to me at halftime, and we've had some conversations throughout the season, and he says, I hate to tell you this, but this game's not over. I said, I'm well aware. And he goes, that one in Lubbock. And I said, I'm going to stop you right there. We've already mentioned it like 3 times about how the tale of two halves in Lubbock. Yeah.
So he was letting you in on the script. He was telling you, hey, we're about to flip this sucker up.
No, he just
okay.
He just pointed out, because I think it was 48-32 at the half in favor of BYU back in Lubbock, and then I think you outscored them 53-30.
Every Tech fan had to be thinking about it, right? Tech or BYU. We all know what happened in the first one.
Absolutely. And Grant walked right into that locker room and probably put that box score up there and said, do not let this happen. And then he had to burn a few timeouts earlier than I know he wanted to. And so there's a lot of time left in this one. And he only had the one timeout, and he did not want to have to use it. And so luckily you had as big of a lead as you did, because, you played through some silly mistakes and some just very poor possessions where you just give them the ball on occasion. But I go back to that first half, Cowan, and like Pop Isaacs, he's just grown so much as a player, not just this year, but really since last year. And he had a different look about him when he starts making baskets. But it's funny because you read the BYU coverage of their team, and it's like, man, Texas Tech's guards run circles around our guys, and they're talking about Pop Isaacs, and I think to a certain extent, in Joe Toussaint. But Pop is just he's maybe he does take an ill-advised shot, according to some at times. Maybe Grant throws up his hand and says, Pop, what are you doing? But there's so much overwhelming positivity with the way he plays, how tough he is, and just him continuing not just to score, but he has a force on the game. And I thought he was, because, think about what you have today. No Darion Williams, who was far less than what he normally is. No Warren. And yet you just got this tough guard at a couple of them. Because Joe right there, and Joe got the flagrant foul, and he got flagrant fouled because Noah Waterman kind of put him on the free throw line as well. After it's like Noah Waterman was on the ground, with that loose ball, and Joe jumped on him and got his hands on the ball, and it's like Noah Waterman's like, dude, what are you playing so hard for? But that's the way these two guards play, man. I love it. It's just. It's like they play so much bigger than they really are, and then you add chance to it, and it's just and I continue just to want to give so much credit to a guy like Grant McCasland, because the only time after a game that Grant talks about himself is he's almost criticizing his coaching, and he never says, "Man, I appreciate the praise," or "We're playing really good." It's like, I've got to do a better job of fill in the blank here. And it's like amazing to me what he's squeezing out of this group. But it's Colin, this is a win that should pay some dividends for you. On paper, it should help you with the net. And, I think you're in a position where you're going to face the number one team in the country. And we'll talk about that, tomorrow's show. But it just sets you up to only help your situation out as far as seeding and next week goes. But, it was a fun day to be a Red Raider in Kansas City, that's for sure.
Grant McCasland, we know, is squeezing every drop out of what these guys have to give. But I think there's also some intangible things that Coach McCasland has nothing to do with, because no coach can coach the models factor, the stones factor, the clutch factor. And you mentioned no Darion Williams. We have to say some Darion Williams because of what I'm about to mention. When you get down to a 7-point difference there late in the ball game, and who comes up big with clutch three-pointers back-to-back, Joe Toussaint and Darion Williams. So even for all the struggles or the just not feeling good and the frustration for Darion, he with Toussaint there at the line to knock down clutch shot after clutch shot. We've talked about that at the free throw line where you've put games away so far this season. Oddly, this day was kind of adventurous at the charity stripe for some, but nonetheless, it has seemed like Tech is a clutch team. You've got some guys who are not afraid to pull that trigger in those moments, and thankfully, not only just not afraid, they can knock it down. I wasn't afraid either, but the result was often very, very different. So you pair the two things together, you've got the fearlessness and the capability, and you come up with some good things, man. Those shots were awesome to watch and a lot of fun whenever that moment came, and it got a little bit tight, but then you had those two guys step up and provide some distance to get you safely across the line.
Yeah, those were the only 3-point makes that either Joe or Darion had the entire day. And I think there's like 4:36 left in the game. And I looked over on the broadcast, and I said to Jeff Haxton, my broadcast partner, I said, man, one of your guards is going to have to make a play to stop the bleeding here. And Joe Toussaint, right at the top of the key, just buried one. You go get a stop. And it goes from a 7-point BYU lead with a lot of blue yelling and feeling like there's a lot of confidence there. And then you look up and it's a 13-point lead. And then all of a sudden Mark Pope calls timeout. And I thought that was really, again, you knew they were going to make a run. They went on a 15-0 run, and it was Joe and Darion that stopped it. And I just those were some of the biggest shots those two kids have had all season long because they answered. And it reminded me of when Baylor took the lead this past Saturday at United Supermarkets Arena. You had controlled that entire game, and all of a sudden, here comes Baylor, just slowly getting back. And they take the lead, and then I think you went on a 13-0 run. And so that speaks to your comment about just the intestinal fortitude or the stones or whatever you want to call it.
Marvelous.
Yes, there's a clutch factor there, but I just it's fun to watch these kids compete, and I do think they get a lot of that from their head coach, man, because he just refuses to give in. He's here to win. He wants to win. Everything is focused on winning. He coaches these kids hard, and they respond, and they certainly continue to answer in the face of adversity, and that's why you're 4-0 in March.
I like the sound of that. I wouldn't mind hearing that again. 5-0 in March, 6-0 in March. On and on we go. So now what? Hey, AP, rank us lower. Rank us lower, cabrones. Okay, I feel like we got to get all the talking out today because what's around the corner? Oh, it's number one. Let's enjoy the win tonight. Tomorrow's episode, we're diving into the Cougars of Houston, who seem to be on a bit of a roll. So get it out tonight, and we got a new challenge coming up tomorrow, but we'll be back on the other side to break all that down and get you ready for that one, Chris. I know you're having fun when the Red Raiders are winning, so enjoy it where you are. We'll do the same back here in the LBK, man, and we'll talk to you for the next one.
Hey, Cougar Tales for everybody, man. Cosmo, we came for you. We got you. But no, I have a healthy respect for the way BYU plays, how unorthodox it is. This was a fun game to get, man. And I know what the computers and the data says about BYU, so I was worried about it. But, yeah, big time win, and we'll see what is on tap against the Houston Cougars. But, yeah, big one today for the Red Raiders in the quarterfinals for sure. But appreciate everybody joining us, and please subscribe. We need it. We need to use all the help we can get, and thanks for listening.
We want to squeeze every drop as well, just like Grant McCaslin. So get in there for a subscription, invite a friend, invite a foe, anybody you know, to do it there on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Thanks for joining us for some bonus reaction time this evening, and hope to see you back tomorrow for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.